God,
Yeah.
I forget what my
I'll record your ass.
Oh my
I forget
god.
what my
Damn it, do
I
I gotta
forget what
restart the
my
recording?
nah, it's fine. Who cares?
Uh,
I always forget that I still have this cringe ass profile pic.
oh well, it's fine. I forgot to create like there's a lot of like people's profiles I still yet to create, so it's all whatever. I'll get
All
around
good.
to it. But anyways, welcome back everybody. Good evening as well. This is another night on How to Trash Take podcast. I'm your host Brian.
I am
Victor,
a
this is where you
guest named
start.
Scott.
Damn.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Hi,
took
my
his
name is
place.
Victor.
God damn it, my co-host,
And
please.
I'm your favorite Brian Bowie trash talker, Loy.
God. Okay, hold on there. Does that mean like you're making trash takes, or you just trash talking to me specifically?
Yes.
Both.
Both.
God damn it.
My love for you is immeasurable.
I
That's some bromance.
we'll call it as it is. And also we have our new feature guest star, Scott.
Hello.
If anything, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, just a small introduction of who you are, what you do.
I am the amusingly token white friend in my entire friend group, and I play games. I'm a nerd, and I am very close to getting my master's in clinical psychology.
So yeah, there we go, guys. In this case, he's achieving way more than I could do too. My parents would be proud of you than me, XD.
Nah, you're doing fine.
Yeah, well. But anyways, on today's topic too, this is more or less a very hot topic in my eyes too, but it's also because of the fact that I'm still weirded out by the whole controversy that's going about this. But it's also again, in this case, what I'm talking about is more social media trending towards being openly racist and practically socially attacking like anyone that's white. Now, depending on everyone else's experience too, depending on how often they get on social media, which if anything I kind of do just because I kind of like to see some of the jokes that are posted on there and whatnot. It was just like a more recent trend that I noticed that a lot more people are just openly taking racist takes towards white people. Like,
Yeah,
albeit, it's like it's something that's always been happening, I'll say at least, but I feel like it's getting a lot worse. At least that's my hot take about it. And I don't think it's also a shit take either, just because I feel like everybody has kind of seen it, right?
I wouldn't say that it's even necessarily a hot take at all. I think it's just like it's something that's happening, and the question is rather like, is it justified? Is it like
Yeah,
okay? Those are the takes rather on it.
yeah. And if anything, this is also sort of less why I kind of want to bring someone else onto because ethically speaking, this whole group we're mostly Asians, right?
Yeah.
And based on our stance about it too, my take about that too is that like I don't think like in general this is the path that we should be going down under, especially since like we shouldn't be racist in general towards anybody, no matter who they are, especially if they are white. That's just my take on that. Some people will criticize me that like no, white people shouldn't deserve like our grace or some shit like that. Like in this case, how do you all feel about like people that are very hard on this topic?
Um,
Well, shit.
Well, there goes that.
I
I mean,
have some stuff to bring up, but I'm gonna wait a moment.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's also sort of less something that's kind of recent as well. That in this case, at
you
least
know,
recent enough.
look, look. In my eyes, people shouldn't be racist, regardless.
Hmm.
That's just how I see things. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter what race you are, shouldn't be racist to one another.
yeah,
Absolutely, I can definitely get behind that.
yeah. And so that's just something that again, I that was pretty much like my stance on it was practically what we were taught mostly in school as like most of us here are millennials. I think Loy is like another millennial, or you consider Gen Z, Loy.
I'm like I'm not I don't think I'm considered Gen Z, to be honest.
Yeah,
Like,
Like
Gen
my
Z.
my I think more like my year. I'm like 97, so I'm like teetering on that border.
Like
But I
Yeah,
you're.
think,
that's basically the border of it.
yeah.
Mhm.
So you can say I'm like in the like in between, but I think I would tend to gravitate more to millennials
Mm. Like in this is
in
you
the
feel
way.
like you identify more as millennial than you are with Gen Z, right?
Yeah, I just don't agree with all the others, like the things that Gen Z brings out.
Yeah.
I don't like. I don't know how to say. It's more like the mannerisms and what they do is like doesn't really appeal to me,
Mm.
and that's what I mean that I don't like identify as Gen Z, even though my age might say it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I think like what it really does come down to, like even then too, like us being in that age group too, we kind of grew up like kind of like being brought to a message that like the whole thing we shouldn't see color kind of deal because like it doesn't matter what race you are. It's like you had to look at that person beyond that, right? So I was wondering too at some point, did we stop teaching that type of message a while back? It seems like.
I would argue that it's not a matter of like the message has changed and what's being taught so much as I think it comes from an entirely different source.
Mm,
Um, so my opinion of this is that the current like essentially like the heightened tensions between minorities and whites is that in the last like decade or so, there's been a kind of a movement to hold white people more accountable for admittedly, yeah, stuff that's happened in the past, stuff that's still happening, like the from the perspective that the majority of people in charge are still, white,
hmm
and trying to hold people accountable for shit they're doing. And I think that it's almost like a pendulum
right.
situation where before it was like you can't say anything at all like bad about white people
Yeah.
because it'll just you will unironically and in the worst possible meaning of the word you will get lynched.
Yeah.
And like that's horrible.
Yeah.
And now we've hit a pendulum swing where we're going the opposite direction. We had a point in the middle where people felt comfortable criticizing, but now people have grown so comfortable that they've gone from criticizing to vilifying, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like in this case too, then, do you think right now with the way how social media has like kind of gave everybody a freaking soapbox to really say out their opinions too? That in this case, some like let's say for the people that are criticizing white people too, especially those in power, do you think in this case the much more like uh it I will call them like the more smaller voices that tend to speak the loudest. They are the ones that kind of like skewing in this case the message of like we should be like putting like the people at least in charge of power accountable for all the shit that's happened. And then this person's just outright attacking anybody that's just a specific race. Which if anything it sounds ironically counterintuitive based off the fact that again, how is like being racist towards already something like that actually gonna help like fix anything? Like that type of message.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with the idea that it's a situation of so let me figure out the wording for this real quick.
It's all good.
The the situation is essentially you're absolutely correct about it being the loudest like minority of people, pun intended, I guess, in this case. Um, like this small subset of people that are just yelling the loudest, and people like drama,
hmm
right? So the posts that have stuff that's inherently dramatic or like controversial get more views. They get more retweets. They get more posts. Because people are debating it or like there's outrage, but that's still making more views. So they wind up getting brought more to the front of the uh,
Yeah.
well, everything.
Like yeah, and it's like one of the things too that like in this case, like damn, what was the word? Oh yeah. Anything because we watched the video a while back that's called like an Asian guy that's considering. Oh yeah, his name is Charlie Chun, and the video title is called like "What Are We Doing to White People," and it's just him making a montage clip about like a lot of like different posts too that all the things that they have said, it sounds really close to being a genocidal style messaging where it's like it's almost as bad as like them saying that we should get rid of all white people for existing. I'm like, what the hell? Like, this is me coming from the fact that like I try my best to be as rational thinking as I possibly can, and there's like these people that I know that we have a history in America that a lot of minority groups have been oppressed for quite some time, but I don't know if this is like something that is like a right decision for everybody to take. Because in this case, it just outright sounds racist in the end.
Well, I don't think it even outright sounds racist. I think it just, by definition, it is.
Yeah.
The question is less like, is it racist, and more like, is this actually a popular sentiment? Like, do
Mhm.
people actually want that? Or is it, again, like that loud minority of people talking? Like,
Yeah.
whereas most people are like, we want them to be held accountable, and then there's just that one guy in the back that just, nah, just fuck them. All of them die.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of looks at him like, what?
Yeah.
Um,
And it doesn't really help too much too that like even like the small like montage clip that Charlie has provided us to, he even stated too that this is only like a fraction of what's currently like a message that's just propagating right now.
yeah, I'm
And
not surprised.
yeah. And it's obvious too that like this is like a sentiment or a lot of the propagation is caused by like a lot of like younger generations that are trying to spread this message. Now, for me though, I'm more or less worried about like how this is going to be taken to because like we grew up at least in a prime of like we try to be more like MLK, whereas the newer generation is like feels like they're leaning towards the way how Malcolm X wanted to handle or change things, which is actually kind of scary in that sense. Maybe this is
Right.
also kind of like my trash take on that too, because I don't think anyone does want to do what they say they will, because the whole nature of social media is like, who knows like what they're actually saying is them being truthful about it or what not to, but the way how a lot of the young people are and how some of them will outright defend their own positions, I don't know. I really don't know what people's intentions are with these types of messaging. And if anything, you also could also like hop into if there's some things that like you want to say about it, or if there's like something interesting that you want to correct me on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, keep going. I mean, honestly, I don't have too much input on this topic.
Hmm. Yeah, because unfortunately, too, Victor here has chosen the smart path by not actually interacting with social media.
Very, very smart.
Yes.
But it's one of those things too. Like I kind of view it as like a way, like it is a very interesting like social like experiment wide too about like how rapid like wild ideas can get passed around that quickly.
So I would liken this to a situation where you're talking with your friends, right, in person,
Hmm.
and they give you some kind of a hypothetical situation, right?
Mm.
Like, oh, some dude like came up and messed with you, or said this or something like that, and in the heat of the moment, you're like, oh yeah, I would beat the crap out of that guy. You're 9 times out of 10, that's not actually going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, if that situation actually happened, they would be like bewildered, confused, and they would say something that they likely wouldn't actually hit the person.
Hmm.
Um, Now there are some people who would, but that's like the most watered down version of this that we can get.
Hmm.
The more extreme it gets, the less likely it's going to be that they actually do that extreme thing they're saying,
Yeah.
right? Now, do I think that means we shouldn't address it? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But it very much feels like one of those situations where someone's speaking in the heat of the moment rather than saying something they actually mean.
Yeah. Because at least my other fear with that too is that like this is also more or less like this country has already have like issues with like white supremacist groups and whatnot too, right?
Oh yeah,
If anything, I feel like in some ways too, this will still like if anything, everything that we do will outrage that group regardless. But I feel like when the whole social media and every other news media outlet is also like openly targeting like white people to begin with too, I feel like this is just gonna radicalize them even further than they already were. Right.
And I absolutely agree with that, because the real take that I would throw out here is that people become radically racist or like join hate groups not out of anger, uh, but out of fear,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Like,
So they're scared of something, and that's why they lash out.
yeah,
Uh,
and
Not justifying them at all, mind you. Like, just because you're scared of something does not mean you should lash out at it.
yeah,
Especially when that fear could be absolutely illogical. But um, so I mentioned earlier that I'm working on my master's in clinical psychology, and we have something that we say in that, which is that anger is a secondary emotion.
mm,
Um, which is to say that it never comes first. It comes from something else.
so
When you're angry,
mm,
you're usually hurt or you're scared or something else bothered you, and it feels safer to be angry than it does to feel that initial emotion.
so in that kind of sense too, would it be considered like much more like a reactionary like state at that point too? Because that kind of does feel that way too. Like you would be more quick to get angry too, sort of less like a reaction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say it's very evident in current politics in the United States, where there's certain words that essentially take someone who might otherwise be willing to talk logically and makes them immediately shut down and be unwilling to listen to anything you have to say, right?
Mm,
Now, don't get me wrong, there are some situations where somebody mentioning a certain word should absolutely set off those kind of red flags and make you shut it down and say, no, I'm not talking with you.
yeah.
um but some of these words have just been turned into that over time, even if it doesn't make any sense for it to be that way.
Mm,
uh Probably the easiest one to mention on that would be like saying something along the lines of socialism. Like, the word socialism immediately brings out such a ridiculous display of like polarization.
mm,
And you get like some people who are like, yes, I think that's a good idea, we should go for that, and other people who are like, if you think that socialism is good, then you are actually evil.
yeah. It's not
um
like
and they're
yeah.
no longer willing to listen anymore at all.
Mm,
And sorry, I am rambling a little bit here, but I will finish off with one point there, and that is very similar to what's going on with hate groups,
mm,
because they do the same thing. They do exactly the same thing. They become completely illogical once their fear is brought forward to their attention.
yeah, and this again, this is sort of less like what I'm really like already like afraid that this will happen to, just because like during like the whole COVID pandemic too, you had a lot of people that were already like targeting like Asian communities in general, just because of like
Hmm.
a lot of, I guess, like people was like not actually understanding like the whole like reasoning why the COVID pandemic spread in the first place. They were just targeting like a lot of Asian communities. Albeit, of course, my very quick reaction was like, I would get mad, but just because the way how that like portrays to us is that like we didn't do anything wrong. Like us
Yeah,
being here, we didn't do anything wrong, and it's just like them attacking them out of reaction that like they're in a shitty situation because of like they can't really target like the virus itself because yeah, what can you really do? You can't beat up a virus, right?
it feels better to have a okay. So sorry, this one might take a second too. Uh,
All good.
uh, so essentially what that comes down to is people don't like when things are out of control. And I don't
Mhm,
even just mean their own control. I mean, they don't like thinking that things aren't under someone's control, right?
mhm,
So they would rather they would rather the idea that the COVID virus, was spread maliciously, like it was a engineered virus in China or something like that, and that is purposely being spread to the world, then believe that it's just a freak accident, because it's scarier to think that there is no control over these things than it is to think that somebody is purposely doing it.
Yeah.
Um, is that fair at all to the people who are getting blamed? No, no, it's awful. Um, but it it's just to quote my to quote something that's very relevant to this. Individuals are smart or can be smart. People are dumb, panicky animals.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So you have the difference of like, and you can if you could get someone one on one, you can usually get through to them and talk to them as long as they're not completely unreasonable. But people in groups that feed off of each other's energy become just absolutely unmanageable.
Yeah. And this is more or less like pretty much what is happening right now with a lot of this too, because a lot of times too, this is sort of less like it comes back and forth where like you have one side of the audience that's not actively wanting to listen to those, and then the other like group, in this case the Generation Z, that are also spewing a lot of like this racist and honestly scary ass like comments about like what they feel about white people, that if you try to correct them on that, they'll just target you as like you're a traitor to this or you're not like a sympathizer and whatnot. I was like, hold on there.
And yeah, unfortunately, that's just a common thread
Mhm.
amongst like racist groups and hate groups is that the if you try to disagree with them, they won't sit there and debate with you logically. They will just attack you.
Yeah.
And that again, that comes because they're scared. They view anybody who's with the other person as an enemy rather than somebody who has a different opinion. There
Mhm.
is no different opinions are not allowed.
It's like, hey, you know what we call that? Totalitarianism.
Yep.
Goddamn. But in general too, it's like it's one of those, looking back at it too and whatnot, it was just like I'm more astonished too that like a lot of times a lot of like the comments that I've always heard of like towards like white people are usually just like stereotypical, like not even that bad of a backhanded comment, because I know this doesn't apply to every group, although it debatably. But regardless, it was one of those things too that like none of the problems that a lot of the comments are facing towards white people are not something that white people actively practice. However, what I do have issues with are those that are like profusely being apologetic about what their ancestors did, or if any at all, if they're even remotely related to it at all. At least that's my issue with
I have mixed feelings on that,
that.
and this is coming from well a white person on this. I on the one hand I agree that the idea of blaming the child isn't fair. Like, obviously, we're not children, but we are the descendants of the people who made those decisions, rather than the actual people who made the decision themselves.
Yeah.
So it's not really fair to us because we had no say in the matter. We didn't like have a place in doing anything.
Yeah.
Particularly like my generation right now, we're only just now getting to the age where we are old enough to like be in politics to try and change things. And so it's not really fair to be blaming anybody in our age group.
Hmm.
Um, but I do think that there is something to be said about it's the middle ground situation where just blaming doesn't do any good, but
Yeah.
asking for accountability is a little different, right? So
Yeah.
because while we may not have been the ones who made those decisions, ultimately a lot of the results of those decisions we have actually benefited from.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, like the overall situation of like a couple hundred years ago we had slavery, and that made a lot of families wealthy and let them build up their fortunes and had them be well off for generations to come. I may not be specifically one of the people who has that in their background. Honestly, I think most of mine were immigrants in the last centuries where I came from. uh, but regardless, it's still a situation of, hey, I'm benefiting from I might be benefiting from the fact that my ancestors were able to do better because of those terrible decisions they made, right?
Mm.
I may be slightly better off for it. The system may not be like biased against me, or I might have a better financial background to be able to make decisions that other people can't. And so I think that a certain amount of accountability is necessary to be like, hey, we need to balance some of these scales, because it is like it's not fair to blame you for the decisions your ancestors made, but it's also not fair that these other people have to continue to suffer from the fact that they did not have the advantages that came with those terrible decisions.
Yeah. And if anything, too, it's sort of less like it's really hard. Like in this case, for me, like I'm like understanding and like I'm empathetic of like how these people feel, especially like them like learning history, right? Because that was also sort of less how majority of us found out about like how racist America was
Yeah.
or still is in some arguments.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, and
Well,
still some
it's very apparent.
yeah, still some arguments. But regardless of ever too, there's another like at least my criticism towards like them like wanting them to be more apologetic or still them blaming for about the past too is like the past has already happened, right? You can only blame a person so much far into the past, like what you said. You can only blame them for so much that at this point right now, just try to do something. That is especially like what you're very passionate and angry about this too. A lot more millennials, they probably had that drive in them too. That's why they're running a lot of times in politics. Just to like try to change things because they themselves didn't agree with like the shit that's happening now or back then.
Yeah.
And it's also like a common understanding too that like for you to be able to actually make change too, it's first and foremost important to always acknowledge your history. Like you cannot hide, nor can you say that like that part of history never happened to. Which, if anything, too, that is also like a comment towards like Japan as well that a lot of people want them to do. Slowly but surely, a lot of like these citizens there are also like apologizing to other like the Asian countries too about what Japan has done, especially during like World War II or before.
Right.
But in this case, Asian racism is like its own separate can of worms to unpack as well.
Yeah, and one that I am definitely not qualified to say much about.
Yeah, it's all good. But it's like in some ways to discuss like again, a lot of the racism itself too is still like driven no matter which country or which parts of your line from. It all like stems from like history. However, we can all still not be in this case racist in the end just because one we have to just start acknowledging that these things happen and actively trying to push for a better future. Is it not right?
I would
Or
agree. I would caveat that by saying that the important thing is not to is to acknowledge that the things happened, and instead of trying to point the finger and place blame, because that it really doesn't help any. I would say that the important thing is to say, all right, these who was affected by it negatively, and how can we help?
yeah, like if anything right now, could you also arguably say too that like people nowadays have lived right now their lives or well-beings are technically a lot better than they were like 50 years ago?
I that's a hard one to argue, because I would say that overall, yes, technically quality of life has improved, but I would say that that's mostly in terms of like the kinds of things we have available, rather than like what we can expect to get out of life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, which
Um
hmm, sorry,
like
go
we
on.
have the internet, we have almost unlimited information available to us. Um Entertainment is at an all-time high in terms of what we can get. You can connect with people across the world instantaneously, but while all of that is true, and like the access, the amount of access we have to all these wonderful things is all the higher, we also have much higher we the problems of economics, of job security, of healthcare, at least in the US, is much more those problems are much more pronounced now than they were 50 years ago.
Yeah, which if anything, it's like I think that's also another things that I feel like a lot of times too, like a lot of the hate messaging and whatnot too are kind of like to me, I feel like they're overshadowing like the actual problems that we should all try to work actively to try to fix, right? Because all it really does too with like all like the back and forth talks between like people that are trying to defend themselves versus people that are just still want to spew out hate too, like nothing gets done the more like people like argue. This is something that at least me and Victor have talked extensively about too, that like if people are really gonna like, let's say, bitch and moan about all this shit too, you just say like, just do it then. Albeit I know that like just do it is also like a very terrible thing to say to others, especially those to like for hate groups, right? If you tell them to just do it if they feel so strongly about it, yeah, we're gonna have some very bad issues there. But this is again like two people that want to like say that like this needs to change and whatnot. I was like, all right, cool. Just join the like the whole group of like politics or the groups of people that can make those changes, right? But obviously, I know like it's not as simple as that either way, right?
Yeah. And I would say it is hard to kind of say for sure, but there's a difference between saying just do it, right? And being reasonable about it, I guess. Because you could just say, "Oh yeah, you have problems because you think you were disadvantaged growing up because you didn't have, you know, you had to worry about things that white people don't have to worry about. You didn't have a good economic upbringing, which I mean that can happen to white people too, but it's more likely to happen to minorities than it is to white people.
Yeah.
Um, you didn't you maybe did, your parents faced more discrimination when they were kids. They didn't have as many job opportunities, which means they didn't get as good of jobs. So you are inconvenient. You are like not inconvenienced. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like in this case, just not set up for all this.
Yeah, essentially, you're made. It's made so that you're not as prepared. You don't have as much resources to make sure you can get out into the world, right?
Hmm.
Um, telling somebody like that, just saying, yeah, just go out and do it anyway, do better, like work harder. That's not how it works. It's
Yeah.
really not. Like we are long past the days where working harder was a direct equivalent to making a better living.
Mm. Yeah. And
Honestly, that might be the hottest take I've said today.
yeah.
um, working harder does not mean a better standard of living anymore.
Yeah. Like if the pandemic hasn't showed us anything at this point right now, too, it's the fact that as well that a lot of people have practically worked their entire lives just to make a bare living. But as soon as the fact that like every one of them kind of lost their jobs too, and they were like not really lost their job, but in this case, a lot of the jobs became remote too, and they had to like be forced to be at home. Like I
Hmm.
feel like inadvertently, when there's like a lot of these racial strifes towards white people was caused because of like TikTok and the rise of more social media. It's like people started questioning a lot about things in life now, right? It gave
Yeah.
more time for people to think, which is, in my opinion, I thought that was a good thing. Here, well, in this case, is the result of like, people might have in this case they thought about it too, but they probably didn't have like the right person to have the conversations that they were thinking about, right?
You wind up in an echo chamber.
Yeah, which is essentially like a lot more people start thinking more. They start posting on social media, and then yes, the chaos ensues from that point on.
So you have a kind of a twofold problem. You have the situation where people are on the internet, and when you're saying stuff on the internet, you have a certain degree of like, oh, it doesn't really matter what I say, right?
Yeah,
Uh, Whereas if you say something wrong in person, you could get seriously hurt. And I don't advocate for that. I don't think it's a good thing that that can happen. Um, but it is it kept people humble, if that makes sense, right?
mm,
If you know that you can get seriously punished for saying something wrong,
mm,
suddenly you think through things a little bit more, and the people who don't generally get in a lot of trouble.
yeah,
Now the internet kind of removes that you don't have to feel like you have to be careful about what you say if you have this like veil of anonymity to protect you.
Mm,
And part of the like inevitable result of that was people coming up with cancel culture, right? And don't get me wrong, like some people absolutely deserve to get canceled for the shit they say
mm. Or have done.
or have done, right? Like we've seen it multiple times with actors or actresses who say something like off the wall or like really racist, and suddenly everyone's like, I'm not watching your shit anymore. I hope they don't hire you again. And
Yeah.
they don't get hired again. I think
Yeah.
like the first example that comes to mind was one of the actresses on The Mandalorian.
Yeah, Gina Carano, if I remember.
Hmm. And she just didn't get hired back because there was so much backlash.
Mhm.
And that's a justified thing. Like when you say something that's like that bad, yeah, you don't get hired again because the company doesn't want to lose profits because people stop watching. Um, and those situations are good because it does teach people like you need to remain humble. You need to think about what you're saying. You can't just spout shit whenever you want.
Mhm.
But
It's been like in this case, this also can feel like the cancel culture part could have also been something on its own time, but this can actually go coincide with it because cancel culture, I feel like it has evolved into what is nowadays like white people targeting or vilifying them kind of deal.
well, and the problem is that frankly, enough white people say stupid shit that they just reinforce the notion.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just like the way how it is too. Like I do think like the people that are targeting it, like just in general too, they're not really caring about like who like is like hurt at the end of like let's say this metaphorical gun that they're pointing at.
Right.
And it's one of those things that like in this case some people do deserve to like get canceled or in this case be like shown in the spotlight of society about like their wrongdoings and possibly like hey we should not do anything else to give this guy a platform. But unfortunately too there comes a time too where it's really hard to really state that otherwise too when the community that's in charge and making sure that they are canceling or they are bringing light to the bringing light of a problem to the right people like in this case they're doing their best to show due diligence that it becomes harder when they just start outright targeting everybody and it forces all of us to question its like substantial like claims that they have that in this case we start doubting the cancel culture. This is also something that like a lot of times I feel bad that happened to the Black Lives Matter movement as well.
Yeah. So it is one of those situations that I would say the difference between a good situation of cancel culture versus a bad situation is essentially the difference between calling someone out on their bullshit
Hmm.
or cyberbullying,
Yeah.
right? So somebody says something that's just absolutely stupid or like completely horrible or racist, anything like that, you immediately call them out. You call them out publicly and say, "What the hell are you doing saying this kind of thing?
Yeah.
Like that is not okay, and you should not be saying that. I like you should be apologizing right now.
Yeah.
And if
And
you don't, then I'm going to like we should not be partaking in anything that you do, right?
mhm.
That is the proper use of a cancel.
Yeah.
The
And
thing that
mm,
is happening instead is somebody says something that's either it might be a little bit on the iffy side or can be interpreted to be on to be bad, which that does happen because some people are really bad with their words. It's not their fault, it's just how it is. Um and then the people don't just reply to the thing that was said. They hunt them down, they find everything they say or do online and harass them
yeah.
even when it has nothing to do with the original thing they said wrong.
I will say
And
too that like,
that is cyberbullying.
yeah. I will say though, this is predominantly affected to a lot of comedians as well, since it's part of their like career and job like that. Like they will also say outlandish shit, but it's like in some cases too, people kind of acknowledge too that like if they know the person is a comedian, they won't really take their words seriously. But it's like sometimes people are just like actively just targeting him. I will say, for example, damn it, Bill Burr, right? People were targeting Bill Burr for a lot of this stuff that he said too, but it's just like again, he's known for saying shit like this, and he's also like outright even targeted himself too, as to counterbalance a lot of the shit that he said.
I think that there is a certain point where comedians that there are certain lines that have to be
Mhm.
drawn for comedians because other like I am an equal opportunity thing when it comes to comedians, right? Like I
Yeah,
don't care who you make fun of as but it should be targeted at people who are okay. If you are targeting people that are like having a hard time, right?
Mhm.
Or who are disadvantaged, that is not comedy. That is that is just being oppressive,
Mhm.
right? So it's the difference between somebody making a joke about, well, frankly, white people, or somebody making a joke about the homeless people on the street, right?
Yeah,
One is making fun of a culture, and a lot of people are going to get offended by it because they're like, "What do you mean? That's my culture. You can't make fun of that." But it's a joke, and it is
yeah,
comedians' like prerogative to make people laugh.
yeah,
Whereas if you're targeting a homeless person, they like they're just trying to get by, man. Like they're just
yeah,
trying to survive. They're not
yeah.
like what the kind of stuff that you're going to make fun of them for is stuff that they're not they didn't choose to be like this.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's like again, something. It's like a lot of times too that like there are sometimes where you could tell if it's a good or a bad comedian based on the fact that how they deliver the jokes too, right? Usually with the bad comedians, they will probably end up like saying shit like that offhanded to like try to see if they can get some laughs or chuckles too because of it. Like in a sort of a desperate measure. However, that is something that in of itself is a profession. That in this case, you have to you be self aware as a comedian yourself about making these jokes. That's like in this case of an art of like how do you make people laugh, especially with the current sensitive times that we're living in. But this is more or less a tangent point of like comedians going through all that. This was more or less an example about like how people in cancel culture were like going really rampant on it. And it seems as though like a lot of people kind of like lost trust of the cancel culture too. That I feel like it's just evolved into like now just targeting white people now. That's how
Yeah.
it kind of feel like it too. And it's like I feel like it kind of itself the cancel culture people kind of like bounced off from like the people that I will say for certain they kind of ruined the image of Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Like this is I feel like what is happening. At least to me, it kind of feels like that. I'm not entirely sure that is exactly how it happened either. But just judging the way how chronologically how the events have played out, I can't help but feel there's like some like same group of people that were part of the cancel culture. They start to realize they're losing credibility. Then they started participating in Black Lives Matter. Then they started doing shit in the guise that this was all for Black Lives Matter. And they're like, wait, hold on a minute. That's not what are you doing? Kind of deal. Stop targeting people like that. We're trying to get people to like respect us, not hate us, right? And therefore they kind of jump ships and now they're part of this group now. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
that's just me kind of reaching there too, but that's how I kind of see those trains of event or those line of events happening.
So here's the weird thing. There was a point, right, a few years back where people were trying to get white people to be more, yes, somewhat apologetic, but more importantly, they're trying to get them to be more accountable for the fact that that their race is literally the majority of people in charge, right?
Hmm.
And that means that we need to hold our leaders accountable. Honestly, I don't think that that should be a situation where it's a race thing. Rather, it should be everyone. But
Yeah.
I understand where they're coming from on it. Uh, and that was okay, right? But
Hmm.
as things tend to go in the internet and in society in general, again, it pendulumed. Right? We went from one extreme to the other, and it will take some time for us to come back to the middle. The question is, are we going to go right back to the opposite, or are we going to slow down and slowly settle in the middle, which would be great? And that really depends on how people react to this, right? So you
Yeah.
have to sternly say, no, this is not okay. We cannot undo decades of pain, hurt, centuries of pain, hurt, and like isolation caused by racism by fighting back with more racism. That
Yeah.
does not work.
It's
We have to be stern about that without being so vehement and like painful with it that it drives people back to the other side where nobody can say anything bad about white people again.
yeah.
Right? That's not going to be good.
Yeah. It's like trying to stop a house fire, but then you throw the nearest liquid available and it just happens to be jet fuel.
Right. So you have to you have to find something that's actually going to put out the fire rather than blow up your house.
Yeah.
Um
Which is something that like it seems as though like a lot of more people, like at least like me observing it, is kind of afraid of happening right now too. Is the fact that there's like it doesn't appear to be like any room for like both groups of people to actively want to like communicate with each other in a much more productive manner.
and I think that's purposeful.
Hmm.
So this all right, this is getting a little bit into politics, and I really hate politics, but
I
well,
know.
it just
I'm
kind of is what it is.
if you
Um,
I wanted to also avoid this too, but if we could cut it short, let's go that way if we can.
yeah, really, really short on it is essentially political groups benefit more from people not knowing what they're talking about than people knowing what they're talking about.
Yeah. As me and Victor have always said, like again, people are in this case, if we really think about it, people are just dumbasses.
Yeah, it benefits the party because all they have to do is get people to vote along loyalty rather than actual policy.
Yeah.
And that is a thing on in both directions. It's just that one direction is, oh, we have some ideas that you might disagree with, and the other one is we literally don't like anybody who isn't us. So
It- yeah. Well, if anything, we'll just cut it off from there too, just
yeah,
because I don't want to talk more about it too, just because me personally, I hate talking about politics too, because that's in the end of the day. In the end of the day, too, this is pretty much what a lot of the hate groups is like trying to target. And I know what I said to it. That's not what I meant. I meant to say "day," not "gay."
I'm just
are
checking,
you sure
man.
you're not just like speaking from your subconscious there?
Hey, I swear I am as straight as a circle.
Hmm.
I always love that fucking
Okay.
joke. I love that joke. All right, but regardless, I really hope that this doesn't blow up more than it should be. Especially like right now, people are like trying to increase the bonfire when it's like, hey man, we get your point. There are people that are actively trying to fix it right now too. People that are right now panicking are not helping their situation of like, or are not helping the people that are actively trying to make the fix, right? And so the better like who if we know like someone in our own friends group that has these types of opinions too and whatnot, I'm not gonna judge you if you have like these types of opinions towards like a group of like let's say a lot of our white friends, right? I have white friends too, and they're again, I don't mind them as much like how much everybody doesn't seem to like tolerate them anymore, which is kind of weird
Hey,
when
hey,
you
man,
live in America.
just tell me how you really feel about me. Come on.
Hey, come on. Nah, hey man, you cool. And if anything, too, out of a lot of the people that have said it, too, you're technically more academically credible than a lot of my friends.
Ah,
It's like, if anything,
that's if I
there's that.
want to be okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sometimes I just want to spout shit and not actually think about it.
Don't we all? Why do you think I made this podcast?
Fair.
Like, this is literally us as a platform to just really say shit. Even if we're not popular, I don't care. This is just me to spout stuff into the void because we end up doing that anyways. Because that's literally the end of the day how a lot of people, like how I see a lot of these people are and how I kind of perceive it too. There's just a bunch of angry people that are just shouting at the void, hoping to the void to speak back to them.
Yes, and it is a lot of people are seeking vindication rather than any actual change, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
They just want to feel like they're heard and they have like people who agree with them.
which is something that I also kind of want to bring you onto this, just because I feel like in the way that how things are going right here too, I do feel like there's like a very obvious trend too that like everybody's mental stability seems to be like shifting as well.
Um,
Though I
that
don't.
that's
Hmm,
that's a tough one. Okay, so I'm assuming by shifting you mean that the mental stability of the average person has gone down, because that's
yeah.
the general consensus most people have.
Hmm.
Um, the answer is a little complicated, but I can sum it up simply as yes, but not as much as you think.
Hmm.
Basically, the idea is rather than the mental state of everyone going down by a lot, which is what some people seem to think,
Hmm.
it is the mental state has gone down more. It has gone down, but it's that we are more aware of it now, and so more people come forward and talk about it and are willing to talk about it than in previous generations.
Hmm.
Um, so it's a combination of there's more awareness. So some of the stuff that was already there that people just didn't realize or know about is just coming to the forefront. And then there's also a little bit of extra because, well, if you haven't noticed, there's been a lot of kind of world-changing crises in the last 30 years.
Yeah, such as the prisoner tree. I'm kidding. It's a fucking war that's going on.
Oh my god. No,
Yeah.
we have the entire situation with 9/11. You have
Hmm.
the advent of the internet, which yes, that is a huge change to the world that a lot of people don't really think about as much. Um, there is COVID. There have been it's been numerous situations of almost cold wars between major political powers. Um, like a lot of stuff has happened. We've already had like what, two recessions in the last 30 years?
Oh man. And they're still saying
Uh
that we're about to go into a recession. I'm like, man, I don't know about y'all. I feel like we're already in
it feels like we never left one.
it.
Um but the point is that yeah, there's a lot of stuff to be stressed out about, right?
Hmm.
Like there's just a lot. And that naturally means that yeah, a lot of people's mental state have gone down.
Hmm.
The cherry on top that's caused a lot of problems, at least in the US, because outside of the US, depending on the country you're in, it's actually a lot better, is that our work environments and the attitudes that companies have has only gotten worse.
Hmm.
We've gone from situations where people a that you could be reasonably sure of your job security and the idea that you have a decent chance of promotion or a raise over time to match inflation and get more money, to now you don't. You're like your job is replaceable. You are replaceable. You're not some valued employee who can
Make a
take pride
difference.
in your work, and make a difference. You are a gear and you make numbers, and that's it.
Yeah. I think me and Victor have talked about this as well too. This sort of less is gonna be like our conversations with that too kind of adds into what we're talking about now. That I feel like a lot of the issues itself, what we're going through is like there's not a single source of like problem that can be addressed. It's a whole wide like system of like buildups that have happened to an individual person that is causing us to either mentally break or just in general like we are now trying to like fix all this because we've had it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, the one thing I will warn against for anybody listening or watching a recording or anything is that the easiest trap to fall into with this kind of situation is thinking, well, if this thing isn't the sole cause of it, then we should find like a bigger thing. No, you can't do that. If it's a problem and it has caused a problem, I don't care if it caused 1% of the problem. I don't care if it caused 50% of the problem. You still got to work on it.
Yeah.
But people seem to want a catch-all, be-all, like fix this and everything's fixed, and that just doesn't exist. Like,
Yeah.
are there some problems that if you solve them, it would solve a lot of it? Yeah, it ain't gonna solve all of it, but it's gonna solve a lot. Uh, if I had to point out one thing that if I could change it would probably make a huge difference. Um, it would be to get rid of the notion of record profits.
Shit.
Get rid of the notion that that record profits are something that every company needs to have, right? Because it's always like every quarter has to do better than the last.
My boy here, Victor, has had like his fair shares of like his company making record profits, but yeah.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Because that mindset has encouraged the companies to cut costs wherever they can in order to make it so that their profits go up, right?
Mhm.
And normally in past decades, like if you go back 50 years, the idea would be, oh, my company is doing better, therefore I will get part of that in return. And they did for a long time. They actually did, not
Yeah.
because they wanted to, but because they were forced to.
Mm.
Um, and that's gone away. So now the company does better. They have record profits, but your wage hasn't changed at all. Your benefits
Yeah.
haven't improved.
Yeah. I feel like that's
You've
another topic.
lost over time because inflation has outpaced your wage.
Yeah. I feel like that itself is also like another topic that me and Victor have touched on or will touch on again too, depending on how badly like this whole situation gets.
Right. I would actually like to hear from you guys. Like, if there's one thing you could change that you think would make the biggest difference, what do you think it would be?
Let's see. I want to at least hear Victor's point of view first, just because one, I always know that you, Victor, you always had like the hottest or biggest takes on this shit too. But it's also because I kind of agree with you as well. I kind of agree with it.
One big change, that'll change a lot of things. Number one, most definitely, is a cultural change. The whole mindset of Americans is just so bizarre to me. And I'm pretty sure that racism and all these troubles that we have in our country stems from just how the culture of America is.
Yeah. And
In my honest
rightfully so.
opinion, like I mean, the thinking of a racist superior has been so ingrained into the culture of America. It's bizarre to me because a culture truly is what makes a country and also what makes a person.
Yeah. And this is also coming from us, like with the background that like a lot of the Asian countries, we do have our own problems of racism in of itself, right? But that was mostly because like during those times in history, they were mostly because it was a warring state as well.
But problem is, Asian people are racist. Is also because of the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say this right now. There is not a single place or country or culture on the planet that is not biased or prejudiced in some way. It
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Some of
Yeah.
them are absolutely justified, is the problem.
Hmm.
People in Ukraine being prejudiced against people in Russia, well, they're kind of being invaded, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um,
But
but
let me ask,
some of it's just not okay.
American. Yeah, but let me ask, Americans being racist is bizarre to me only because this country is supposed to be a melting pot where all the races come together and live together under a country. But why are we just that racist to others?
So I think that the problem there is that the idea of a melting pot is a misnomer.
Hmm.
Uh, and it comes from this propaganda that came in basically around the time of the First World War. Where the idea was that people are coming to the U.S. for realistically, they're not coming because of the culture of like, oh, there's all these different cultures I get to know and realize. Because at the time, people didn't like that. They like their own culture. They want nothing to do with yours.
Yeah.
Um, it came from the melting pot thing came as a thing, and it was only really aimed at Europeans.
Yeah, because like during those times, there was also still like the Chinese Exclusionary Act that still got passed out or
Mhm.
was still enforced during those times as well, which is
Also,
like holy shit.
the other problem is that a melting pot is not it is inherently essentially this is going to be a really hot take, admittedly, is inherently a racist idea to begin with.
Yeah, because like
It is implying that all the races need to be the same. Like all the cultures need to be the same because a melting pot doesn't say, "Oh, you join us and keep your culture and keep what makes you unique." It says, "No, join us, become us, do not be different than us."
Yeah, I feel like that was in this case a message that in this case did get overlooked, and it's like a lot of times too people that want to use the term melting pot in like a much more positive connotation, right? Like in this case, I've in this case been a subscriber to that, but in this case, I'm taking it in a context that America in itself has a very unique situation of cultures that in this case, first of all, it is a country that itself grew really fast compared to the history of all the other countries in existence, right?
It's true.
And so, yes, there's also like the theory, or not theory, there's a whole history that tracks to that, like, it was mostly like our Anglo-Saxon European uh, immigrants that were the one that built the countries too. However, it was also, again, then there was the introduction of all the other race as well, just because, Christopher Columbus, albeit controversial as he is, he provided an opportunity for not just people in Europe, but like literally everywhere else. Albeit it's a sad way how they found out about it, but yeah.
Very true.
But in this case, this is also in some ways in China as well. Like the news about like a new world reached to them through like the Silk Trade or the Silk Roads, right? And a lot of times, too, the Chinese immigrants that moved to America were probably just farmers that also, first of all, they didn't want any part of like the warring state that China was constantly in. So therefore, there was like a whole wave of like Chinese immigrants that came through in America. It's like, wait, where the hell did these guys come from?
And I would say, so if I were to give a better analogy for a healthy way to have multiculturalism in a country, I would say instead of a melting pot where you lose your culture to
Mhm.
become part of the mix mash of what's there, I would say a gallery of culture.
Yeah.
So pick and choose, go around, observe the different cultures, partake in them, but you still have your own. You can still go back to your own if you want. You can join another culture if you want. If you really want to go out there and like fully immerse yourself in a culture and be with them and live with them and essentially be like make yourself part of it, that would be encouraged in that kind of a situation, right?
Yeah. Which I
But
do
that's
think,
not what we have.
yeah. Which I do wish that like at least more people, at least right now, like they, I want to believe that some people are also recognizing the fact that America itself is positioned in such a culturally unique way that we can at least like be a center of, in this case, what a lot of like other countries are actively like try to pursue, right? In this
Yeah.
case, America itself during the time was also like, to everybody else, we were considered very progressive for what it was.
At the
But
time, yes, but we rapidly fell behind.
yeah, just because right now there's a lot of a lot of like internal conflicts that occur too, which kind of goes with like trying to run a country of like as big as the United States.
I wouldn't even say that it's because of conflict. I think we became stagnant out of a feeling of arrogance. And that's going to be a kind of a weird thing to say in that situation. But essentially, we came out of. Think about the history of the United States, right?
Mhm.
We broke away from what was at the time the strongest international empire in the world, right? We broke away from Britain, um, and our heritage essentially was that we broke those shackles we had to Britain,
Mhm.
and we forged our own destiny, manifest destiny, go to the other side of the the continent, claim all that land, and we were in a unique position where we have an enormous amount of land, resources, and security by being on the opposite side of an entire ocean from the rest of what was that considered at that time the civilized world, right?
Right.
We were given essentially in a position where everything was handed to us to be successful because we didn't really have competition. We had a ridiculous amount of space and a ridiculous amount of resources, and the early people of the United States took advantage of that, and that's why the United States blew up as it did. Then the Civil War, can't really say anything about that because it's literally a civil war, so it doesn't affect as much in terms of the arrogance.
Yeah.
The arrogance came from later on. We have the really big one, World War One, right? World War One completely stalled, and then we join in, and suddenly it's over, and that immediately inflates the American ego of like, yeah, we did that, even though there's a lot more factors that went into it than just us joining.
Yeah.
Same thing happens again, World War II. We join in, and suddenly everything gets turned on its head. Now, admittedly, in World War II, there was a big difference there that came from us joining.
Yeah.
It wasn't the sole factor, but it was a very big one.
Yeah.
And so that breeds confidence, right? And so while the rest of the world is still looking at us as paragons of like strength and progress, we became stagnant
Yeah.
because we thought we're already the best. Why do we need to change?
Yeah. And if anything too, a lot of the opinions of like how other countries see America have shifted because of that notion.
Oh yeah.
Like I think before too, like a lot of foreigners actually do think too that like America is like, you guys are so like culturally diverse
Backwards.
too, or culturally diverse too. How the hell is there like still a problem of racism, or if anything, why does race matter? Kind of deal.
And I think part of that is absolutely a political thing. Like,
Yeah.
I think that racism is kept as an important topic for politics in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like people saying that racism exists is being political. I think it's the other way around. I think people trying to downplay racism is manipulating things for politics.
Yeah.
But part of it also comes from, so we are a backwards nation in
Yeah.
so many ways.
Which,
And
if anything, I feel like these are all separate topics that we could
God,
go on.
yes. Unfortunately, it's like one of those you can't really separate them
Yeah.
because they are entirely intertwined. But if I had to blame if I was forced to say pick a group and blame them for the way that America is, right? First of all, I don't want to do that because it's a way oversimplifies things.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna blame the Puritans.
Oh.
Yeah, going way back there.
Okay. Damn. It's like
Um,
almost like the Quaker days too. Actually, do Quakers still exist? Actually, now that I think about it.
yes, they do.
Okay.
But Puritans. How much do you guys know about the Puritans?
Only based on history. Based on that.
Not much except from the history books.
Yeah,
in
whatever.
school.
Yeah, whatever history class taught.
All right, so the history classes teach some of this, but they don't really get down to the meat and potatoes of it, right? And I am an Irishman, so I love that phrase. It's fantastic. The Puritans were a religious group, a religious splinter of Christianity, and they had beliefs that essentially are along the lines of if anything that comes to mind when you think of the word prude, that's a Puritan.
Ah, interesting.
And I mean as extreme as you can think of in terms of prude, that's a Puritan. Showing ankles, that's scandalous, that's a Puritan. Right? The idea of like sex, of adult topics, of anything like that needing to be hidden, all of that comes from Puritan culture, and they were hated in Europe. Nobody liked the Puritans.
You know, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, because they were a bunch of stuck-up, like, assholes who essentially took on an exceedingly holier-than-thou attitude and told everyone else that they're being sinful for doing things that people have been doing for literally millennia.
Yeah.
Nobody likes being judged.
which is honestly
Uh,
fair.
and also really ironic for people to feel that way when they were also another flavor of Christians who were also being very judgy in other ways. Um, it's just that Puritans were the judgiest of the lot.
Mhm.
So they essentially got kicked out of Europe.
Huh.
Oh damn.
So does that mean that like there, in this case, some of the founding fathers of America, not like our main presidents? Actually, no, some of the main presidents like Puritans. I don't remember that.
Yes, actually.
Oh,
So a decent number of the people who were in the founding fathers were Puritans. Not a lot of
interesting.
them, but a decent little chunk. And a lot of the culture of America stems from these ideals that they had. So look around the world. Look at the media of the world for a quick second, right? What is more likely to be censored in Europe? A person getting shot or a woman going topless on the beach?
Huh. Usually, like the shootings, right? Because the fact that like
Hmm.
Europe has a lot more like stricter policies on that.
Right, but not just that, they have very lax policies about things of a sexual nature because it's a natural thing. Literally natural.
Yeah.
Um, and they look at that and they say, all right, you know what? People being interested in the other sex or their own sex or anything is normal. It's natural. It's fine. Whatever. Who cares?
Yeah.
Someone shooting someone, glorifying the idea of someone shooting someone or causing harm to someone else is not normal.
Yeah.
America takes that and flips it on its head. We're so steeped in Puritan values that a parent is more likely to be mortified and upset about there being a naked woman on screen than they are about someone getting shot.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like all the comments to the, like I said, this will kind of be like off topic, but it's like again, it kind of relates to like, is America being desensitized about all of these like mass shootings? It's not the fact that we're desensitized to all this. This is sort of less like something that has been going on since the conception, in a
I mean,
sense,
kind of, yeah, in a way.
if you
Um,
really trace back to that. But if anything, this is sort of less off topic to begin with.
yeah. So I brought up the topic of Puritans specifically because they are a lot of where a lot of the like cancerous views in our culture come from.
Mhm. And
Because it's not just the prudish things that are there.
mhm.
The Puritans are called that because they believed in a purity, and I don't just mean purity in terms of behavior about sex. They were very much about racial purity.
Mhm. So if anything
Um,
too, it's like in some ways too, I feel like a lot of like the racial blight and whatnot too towards white people can also be said to like, I think you guys should be more mad about like people that in this case have a Puritan background, or if anything, that they support these Puritan ideals.
well, if you want to think about what the stereotypical Puritan looks like nowadays, first of all, there is no religion that just calls itself Puritan anymore. They don't
Yeah,
exist. Um,
fair enough.
if you want the worst example of something that you could think of as being Puritan,
I have a name that came up:
go for it.
the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah, that's a pretty good example.
And yeah, for
Um,
those that don't know, they are also the most radically Christian groups in America as well.
one of them.
One of, yeah.
Uh, and that's the kind of thing that people are like when people are talking about all the terrible things they think of when they think of white people, every single one of them, every single one of them can be brought straight back to Puritans.
Yeah. Oh man. If anything too, I just hope too that like at the end of the day the message being too is like, as much as like, as what it's worth to how a lot of people are mad about like this case having the white population in America to apologize for the things that they have done. And if anything, I would at least say I hear your frustrations too. A lot of times you have to make sure that like some of your own members that are saying these types of message to, that they themselves know like the weight of the words that they're saying. Just because words carry more meaning than a picture. In this, I don't remember the idiom or the proverb for that.
Oh, it actually goes the other way around. It's like a
Oh,
picture is worth 1,000 words.
oh, pictures worth 1,000 words. God damn it. Anyways, I butchered that. Anyways, every one of you at least gets my point, right?
Dumbass. I'm just kidding.
Come on. Everyone here at least gets my point. As
Also,
much as,
I
like,
thoroughly apologize for like monopolizing.
I mean, it's all good.
Uh,
If anything, like,
I tend to be
Damn.
long-winded.
I'm just kidding.
but no, if anything, too, it's sort of less like we kind of at least agree to that. I think like we're also the least qualified people to really talk about some things like that too, just because one, we're all fucking Asian here. And if anything, we can only speak to it in the lens of like us being like living the life that we've had so far. So if anything,
So I get where you're coming from on that, saying like, oh, I'm
yeah, and it's
I'm the
like,
white guy here, so I'm talking about my perspective. But
yeah,
y'all's perspective in terms of like what you see other people saying about white people is also still really important.
yeah. Which if anything, it's like one things that I've heard too. That's just like I think there was like a video that came out that I saw too. I don't know if I showed you this one, Victor, or was it also in like Charlie's video where it's like this Asian girl that goes in saying that like before you even bring your white friend to the group too, you make sure you ask the consensus of your other friends group that they're okay with getting introduced to the white person. I'm like, what the fuck?
I think I saw that video as well. I didn't agree with it.
I was just like, who's gonna take the time and effort for this shit? And also, why does that matter? It's like you're young as fuck, right? Or if anything, you're young. This shouldn't matter as much as like your friends group, unless they're really like actively think about that. If that's the case too, I think that person needs better friends. I'm gonna be honest. But I digress. That is an opinion take out about it. But it's like in general, like I don't agree with like a lot of times too about having the white people like forcing them to apologize for the shit too. Like I get that in history, that is something that they have done. I guess that's just also for me as well. Like I never felt like strongly enough to the point where like I would want Scott to apologize, like all the shit that his ancestors did, or if anything, if he's even remotely related to any of the shit that they did.
And the really funny thing is that I'm not like
Yeah, I know.
I think all of my people came in the last like 100 years.
Yeah, yeah. So, like I said, I wouldn't go around doing that too because a lot of times people, again, they're not really taking in consideration of a person themselves, like individually, right? Because again, this is more than just race at this point right now.
Yeah.
Like, I hopefully this does get the point across that I'm here for the fact that one, people that are being mad, you should at least be mad at like something more than just race here. Because it's one of the things too that I've heard that like it's even racist to not see color now, right? Because that was something that like we were given a message too. But again, I also see like what you mean too. Like this brings back to the analogy of the melting pot. To not see color is sort of less you're propagating the idea that everybody else should just be like merge itself to the American culture, which unfortunately was predominantly white, right? We all kind of, at least me, Victor, and Lloyd, we grew like our own experiences about like how we saw other people were treated if they weren't like accepting of the culture or they weren't integrated in culture that well.
Yeah.
And that's sort of less like I feel like that itself was probably what sparked a lot of people's opinions towards that too, because they themselves were probably not accepted based on where they came from. But sometimes like I've even heard stories or I was at least like know some people in my own family too that they didn't care if they were accepted or not too. They just lived the way how they like to live. And they're people that are willing to talk with them, that's their friend. That was as simple, at least how I took it. I don't know how it is nowadays, I'm gonna be honest with you. Just because as much as like I myself like take a lot of the shit and some of the talking points I have are based off what I see in social media, I still don't get anything that happened on there. I'm gonna be honest. And it's like, do I feel bad that I wish I knew more? Not really. Thankfully, this is also good for my own mental health as well. That I don't get myself riled up or I don't get like what people are mostly complaining and mad about. But in this case, I do my best to just read between the lines and try to figure out like if they are truly mad about the person's race or they themselves are just mad about something that at this point right now, their only way of that to really feel better is what you said earlier, be vindicative about things, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully that is pretty much what I'm trying to go at. Not trying to say force everyone else to just be logical, but like take it like a step back and truly think about like what you say as like a what would like an upstanding person say in all this situation? Because if anything else, I would like to think that we should all at least live by the words of MLK, but none of us should ever have to resort to the actions of Malcolm X. That is all
And
I
as
got to say.
the last thing that I would say on the topic is essentially to anybody who like is in a position of being like talked to about like, hey, your people did this, your people did that. Don't react defensively. React in a way that says, okay, I see, I get it. How can I help? Reach that hand out, help people.
Yeah.
Do not show like do not fight back with like I'm going like no, you're completely wrong, you're crazy. No. All right, there's a problem. Help me know what it is so I can help fix it.
Yeah. Because that only then can actually we can see meaningful change.
And you won't always get a good reaction to that. Some people don't want help, they want to be angry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I'm going into counseling, I know that all too well. There are people who come in, they don't want to hear solutions. They don't want to hear things about like, oh, this is what you can do to improve your life. No, they want to be mad. And that's okay. It's actually okay because a lot of times you just need to get it out. Just as long as you get it out with words and not violence.
Yeah. I will say though too, this was actually a really like productive talk as well. We're already hitting the hour 30-minute mark, which usually is where I will end my video. If any of y'all have any other last minute words that you want to say before we sign off here.
No,
None
good.
else from me.
Well, hope you all have a good evening and stay safe out there, guys.
Make love to yourself. I'm just kidding, y'all.
Oh God.
No, that needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, make love to yourself in whatever situation it is. Just don't publicly tell people or share that shit on Twitter. Oh my God, there are so many people that are way too comfortable on social media that I think they need to get off.
True.
Anyways,
Yup.
good night, y'all.